Fans for Life podcast. I am Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz Makhani. And Shahnavaz, this episode last week, wow. I mean, we talked about some of the things the Mavs could do, or some of the things the Mavs needed to do. And whoa, shout out to Nico Harrison. We talked about this. This was his time, either now or the offseason. This was his time to make the move. So now in this episode, we're going to talk about how the Mavs acquired PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, both of them. And then also the 3-game win streak the Mavs are on as well. Heading into the All-Star break, they have 3 home games and how pivotal those games are for them to move up in the Western Conference. So, Shahnavaz, just first of all, let's start with PJ Washington, right? I feel like that's the guy who, you know, I felt was best for what the Mavs had and what the Mavs needed at this time, realistically.
Yep.
Obviously, you know, the wish list was, you know, better players, but for what the Mavs need surrounding their 2 stars, I felt like PJ Washington was perfect for them. You know, we talked about this last week, all the things that he does well. I won't really go into a barrel hole with that, but just Shahnavaz, what was your initial reaction to the trade when they traded Grant Williams, Steph Curry, and then a first-round pick, 2027, for PJ Washington, and 2 second-round picks?
Yeah. So there's a lot of layers to this, right? Because I think, you know, there was reports that obviously the Mavs were going after Kyle Kuzma early, and I think that kind of fell apart. I think Kuzma wanted to stay in Washington. Washington wanted to keep Kyle Kuzma. And then Dallas looks like, based on everything I've read, pivoted over to PJ Washington, who, you know, like we've talked about, is a local kid, grew up in Frisco, you know, grew up a Mavs fan. I think, you know, my first point is I think Nico listens to our podcast because Mavericks traded for 2 of the guys that you and I mentioned last week on the pod. So shout out to Nico for listening in, hopefully.
Yeah, put us on the payroll.
But seriously, man, no, like he's a great fit. Like he's everything that we wanted Grant Williams to be, but more athletic, I think, right? And I don't know if I've seen some things that the Mavericks preferred PJ Washington over Grant Williams last summer. I don't know how true that is, you know. But the crazy thing about Nico is his ability to kind of identify when a mistake has been made and really to turn this, you know, flip this switch and say, you know what, we don't have time to waste to see if this works out. Like we gotta fix this right away. You know, I think that's a credit to him to be able to identify, you know, a mistake like that. You know, whether it's the JaVale McGee signing, whether it's the Christian Wood signing, you know, the trade for Grant Williams. I mean, we were all high on Grant Williams, and by all accounts, he's a great guy. It just didn't work out, you know, whether it's conditioning, whether it's just the role he was, you know, asked to fill. It didn't work out, but shout out to Nico, man, for being able to say, you know what, this isn't working. Like, let me go. I got to fix this now because we're running out of time. Like we this isn't something we can wait and see, you know, oh, can we do this over the summer or not? And I know the biggest point of contention with this is giving up the 27 pick, you know, because of the fact that that's a year after Luka's contract ends. And there's always the possibility, of course, if he leaves, you know, blah, blah, blah. First off, I don't think he would leave for nothing. I think if anything, if there is, you know, if it ever, God forbid, came to that point, the Mavericks would recoup their value in that point. But to your point, Landon, that you just made, you got to go in. You know, when you've got a top 5 player in the NBA, you have to make every single move, you know, possible to put the best team around him. Has that worked out so far? No. But if you look at every single year, you know, there's been experimentation, right? After the Western Conference Finals year, it was, okay, let's see if just having Dinwiddie and Dorian works. It didn't. Okay, clearly we need another player next to Luka, so let's go get Kyrie. Then it was, all right, over the summer, we know we need these 3-and-D type guys, so let's go get Grant Williams. That didn't work. Let's pivot to another guy who probably fits a little bit better in PJ Washington. So the ability to kind of adapt the roster on the fly, knowing what fits next to Luka, I think is huge for Nico. And giving up that pick, like, yeah, it sucks, but when you've got a top 5 player in the league, like that pick is going to be in the late 20s, or you're going to trade it anyway. You recoup 2 second rounders, and we've seen the value that second round picks have now across the league, where you're trading small contract guys with second round picks and getting pretty decent value out of it. So as long as you have those picks, like, that's going to come into play. So I think the move to get PJ Washington was fantastic. I think it puts the Mavericks in a really good position. Not only that, he's young, he's 25, he fits the timeline, and he's under contract for another 3 years and on a really good salary. So hats off to Nico for that, man. I mean, that was just a killer move in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like there's more people focused on the draft picks than surrounding Luka with better talent. That's what it really boils down to, because this team finally has a young core, and that's what you really wanted with Luka. They really rebuilt it in 1 year. I mean, after the Western Conference Finals run, they spent, a bad season reconstructing their roster. And that's the best part about this, because you and I said that this season is a transition season. Like, we're seeing the Mavs actually can salvage some things in a transition season if if the new pieces fit fast, transition fast, and they actually win some ball games. And because next season was a season we thought they could move into that contention once they make the right pieces, and I think they're on their way to doing that with the pieces that they did. And speaking specifically with PJ Washington, I feel like this is the perfect move for the Mavericks, because not only you get a guy who fits what you want to do, especially the versatility in playing different positions, and then also being able to shoot. He has the ability to create shots. That's what they're lacking. And then also, he plays bigger than what he is. He's 6'7", but he has a 7'2" wingspan. Not a lot of players have that. And his standing reach is similar. His body is really similar to Kawhi when you think of measurements. And that's really crazy, because I think he will actually unleash his potential. I think most people are focusing on what they see now and not what you see when you're playing with Luka and Kyrie. I mean, that's the same thing with Derrick Jones Jr. I mean, no one saw what he was going to be able to do now, but now PJ Washington is going to get those open shots. He's going to get when Luka's out, PJ Washington's going to be able to get buckets. When Kyrie's out, he's going to have a second guy in the lineup who can create his own shot. And that's the problem. They didn't have that. THJ, he can put shots up, but we're talking about offense creation. And I think that's a special thing with PJ. And not only that, I mean, like you said, they're in win now mode. Like, you can focus on pick swaps all you want, but you're trying to win. Luka says it. He says what he wants is a championship. So why are you worrying about pick swaps a few years down the road when you're trying to win now? And that's the whole ordeal. And Luka loved the trade. Luka wanted the trade. That's the biggest thing in all of this. Luka, he is in those conversations. Kyrie is in those conversations. You don't think Nico brought it to their attention? Hey, we have a move for PJ Washington. We're going to give up Grant and Seth in the first round pick. What's y'all's thoughts on this? You don't think they said, oh, yes, let's get him. He makes our team better. You don't think if they said, nah, I don't know about that one. A first round pick? I don't know. They're not going to make the move. These are the 2-star players who they invest over $40 million in, and they're your franchise. Luka's your franchise player, and Kyrie is he's the all NBA type of talent, one of the greatest to play, and he still has his game in him. You want the value of their opinion, and I think that's what all entails into PJ Washington coming to Dallas. And like you said, he's from here. He still lives here in the offseason. His trainer is here. I mean, his trainer lives in Dallas Fort Worth. So I mean, there's so many things that makes this move right.
Yeah, and the other thing about it, it's like, if you keep that pick, I mean, what is a 19-year-old, 18-year-old kid in 2027 going to do when Luka's 27 years old, right? Like that pick's not going to help. I mean, I heard something really interesting, and it was like if you have a top 5 or even a top 10 player, like your goal should be to win now, right? Like you're regardless of what it is, you'd make moves to win now. So those first round picks in 5 years, 4 years aren't going to make a difference. Like that's not going to make your team marginally better or worse. You know, you get players that help you now. I mean, Milwaukee, when's the last time Milwaukee had a first round draft pick? It was Giannis, right? Or one that worked out. Everything else, you save those picks and you go get a Drew Holiday, you go get a Damian Lillard, right? Like that's what you do. You put pieces around your superstar. So that's exactly what Nico Harrison's doing. And Landon, the fact that the Mavericks didn't give up Josh Green in this deal, and I think that's why you had to include the first round pick, is to me is awesome because you and I have talked about this. Like we're both big Josh Green fans, and I think we're starting to see the emergence of kind of what he's going to be. The confidence looks like it's there. He's been really effective recently. Defensively, he's been great. I think you're starting to see kind of the makings of he's feeling more comfortable in his role, and he's feeling more comfortable next to Luka and Kyrie. So being able to hold on to a guy that you've got under contract now for the next 4 years, everybody's timeline kind of fits. Like if, and to be honest, they're all movable pieces. Like if PJ Washington doesn't work out, unfortunately, a year down the road, guess what? His contract is the same. I think it's a $2 million, $3 million less than what or more than Grant Williams was. So you can easily move that deal. You can package that and move. So it's not like you're becoming hamstrung by a certain contract. It's just you have to figure out how these pieces work. And if Luka signs off on it, then by all means, go for it.
Yeah, that's a great point. That you're also not only building a young core around Luka, you're building assets. They didn't have any assets, and that's the problem. And for what they shipped out for PJ Washington, I mean, let's just be honest. Seth wasn't in the rotation, and you just mentioned you don't know what you're going to get in the first round pick. And Grant Williams, he wasn't performing to their expectations. So you really, especially with Maxi Kleber coming back and playing defense and shooting threes.
My goodness.
I mean, do you really miss Grant Williams? You don't.
I'd rather play Maxi over Grant right now. Like that's
he's playing phenomenal.
Poor
and that's what
I feel bad. Dude comes to Dallas and gets traded every time.
I mean, they are paying them though. They're giving them those contracts. So hey, when your contract's up, Seth, come back and we'll take care of you.
Yeah. Help us out. Help us get
it's a win-win. I mean, we pay you, and then we'll find you a situation.
We'll send you back home again. That's what we'll do.
And that's the thing. I feel, and I said it last pod. I feel like you have to surround Luka with young, athletic players. And then Kyrie should be the only, THJ and Kyrie and Maxi, there's your veterans right there, but you really only need Kyrie long-term as your veteran. I mean, you need guys who are in their late 20s and young, younger than Luka. And that's what you're seeing now. They have 7 players that are younger than 26. And then 8 if you count Derrick Jones Jr., who is 26.
Which is crazy if you look back at this roster, like, a year ago, 2 years ago, like everyone's that 28, 29, 30. And the way that Nico Harrison has been able to revamp this thing on the fly, to your point, like you said, we both mentioned at the beginning of the year, like this was a transition year for the Mavs. And to be able to now, you've got 30 games to kind of see, does this work, right? How does it kind of play out? We're not saying the Mavs are going to make the finals, No. But this gives them a shot to get out of the first round easily. Right? Like, I mean, this better than we've had. I mean, you look at what the Mavericks have done with players that have kind of been, I don't want to say miscast, but you look at like when Reggie Bullock was here, right? Like Reggie Bullock was not a heralded signing or anything, but he fit the role perfectly, right? Like that's what somebody like PJ Washington can do is he knows what his role is. He can fit that role and he's younger now. And it's mind blowing the way that this team has been reshaped over the last year and a half. I mean, I don't I don't know how anyone can give Nico Harrison anything but credit. Like, he's fixed his mistakes. He's gotten off, players that haven't fit, give him a shot, right? Like JaVale or like Christian Wood, like I mentioned. But boom, he's moved him out. It's not like, oh, well, we're going to keep him or we're going to see what happens and let's try to make them fit. No, if it doesn't fit, get off of it. That's it. Because we gotta win now. And I love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
Great signing, great trade, and both players arrive in Dallas today. We'll see a small chance if they even suit up for tomorrow, but it's an afternoon game, so that pushes everything up on a time crunch. But just overall, they made another move as well with Daniel Gafford. I mean, you talked about it feels like I was the PJ guy and you were Daniel Gafford. You talked about him a lot, just for what he does. I wish they brought the other guy you said, Denny, as well. That would have been great. But just from what they traded Rashawn Holmes and a first-round pick in 2024, which they acquired from OKC Thunder through a 2028 pick swap. And that's why we talked about the pick swaps. So Shahnavaz getting Daniel Gafford for Rashawn Holmes in a first-round pick. What was your initial reaction to that, and how does he fit with the team?
I think I love that move more than the PJ Washington move, to be honest. Like, and it's no disrespect to PJ Washington, but I mean, and you saw it last night against the game with the Knicks. Like, without Derek Lively, like, this team can't rebound. Like, it's a struggle. Offensively, defensively, they can't guard the paint. With Lively on the floor, the defensive rating, I think they're 15th in the league. Without him, they're 27th. Like, there's a significant drop off without Derek Lively. And you're playing guys like Dwight Powell, you're playing Maxey out of position at center. Daniel Gafford brings you guys averaging 11 and 8. I think he's the third most efficient scorer in the paint. Literally all he does is pick and roll and catch a lot. He's Derek Lively 2.0. Or Derek Lively is Gafford 2.0, if you want to, since Gafford's been in the league longer. This dude is, if you just watch his highlights, I mean, dude is athletic. Dude can block shots. He's a really, really good defender, covers the paint well, and more importantly, he knows his role. Like, this isn't a guy that's going to come in and say, I need my shots. I need this. I need that. Dude does everything Derek Lively does, but he's durable. He stays on the floor. And now, if you're the Mavericks, now you're in a position where you don't have to bank on your defensive efficiency on a 19-year-old rookie, coming into the league and who's still, and it's not a knock on Derek Lively, but he's still figuring things out, right? I mean, the kid's 19 years old. Like, this is going to take some time. So you bring in a guy who's been in the league for 4 or 5 years, who's been through the ringer with Chicago, with Washington, knows exactly what his role is. He's never played with lob threats like Kyrie and Luka before. I'm so excited about this, if you can't tell, just because even when Lively's playing in games and he goes off the floor, the Mavericks are pretty much scrambling at center. You're throwing out Rashawn Holmes, you're throwing out Dwight Powell. Dwight Powell now gets to play like the Boban role, where he's just like that bench guy, the cheerleader, like come in, during blowouts. If we're resting a bunch of people, Gafford's a guy that you can plug and play if Lively's out, put him in the starting lineup, and you won't miss a beat. I mean, he provides you that other defensive anchor and gives the Mavericks more depth, because now when you couple that with PJ Washington, you're moving guys like Derek Jones Jr. to the bench. You're moving guys like Maxey, who can now play the 4 off the bench as opposed to being miscast as a 5. You're allowing, if you want to keep starting Dante Exum when he comes back, fine, start him at the 3. But now you've got Josh Green off the bench with Tim Hardaway Jr. So now you're adding these other layers. The Mavericks finally now have like a legit 9-10 man rotation where you don't have to worry if somebody's out or is missing from a game due to injury. You've got enough firepower now to be able to kind of rectify that. And having a guy like Daniel Gafford just adds to your bench, at least, or even if he's in the starting lineup, if Derek Lively's out, gives you another defensive anchor. So you're not scrambling at that position to defend. I mean, I absolutely love the move. That's the one I wanted. You and I talked about it last week. Like,
we see it, Shahnavaz. We see it.
That was the guy I wanted, man. I was so happy when that came through. I was just like, thank God, man. I was like, bless you, Nico. Like, this is just a great move.
No, I mean, just like I said, PJ Washington is my guy, and Daniel Gafford's your guy. And it's a seamless transition. I mean, it's like the Spider-Man meme. When you look like Derek Lively looking at Daniel Gafford is like the Spider-Man meme. I mean, honestly, you really haven't had this duo at their big man rotation since Tyson Chandler and Brendan Haywood, like two quality big men who have the ability to start for teams. I mean, Gafford was starting, and they're both young. I mean, Lively's 19, Gafford is 25. That's what's crazy about this. He's 25.
A really good contract.
Really good contract. And that's what you find out with this team. Even if, I mean, Lively has to start, obviously. You wanted him to keep that confidence and play that ability that he's been playing. He deserves it. But Gafford can play more minutes. That's the thing. Like, you can have Lively play, 23, 24 minutes, and you can have Gafford some nights play 30 minutes or 32 minutes when Lively's getting in foul trouble or Lively is just having an off night. You can have Gafford play more minutes than Lively, but just having those two guys play 48 minutes at the center position, that's a dream. And that's like Luka opening Christmas presents. That's what you want for big men. Those two guys all game. And Luka plays like 40 minutes a game now. So, I mean, just having those two guys as your pick and roll partner, I mean, you're going from what Dwight Powell and, Mike Tobey from his international team for years to Lively and Gafford every single night. That's crazy.
And it gives you the luxury as well to kind of, and we talked about this at the beginning of the year, but it gives you the ability to kind of play either one based on matchups, right? Like if you're going up against the Nuggets, you might want to play Daniel Gafford a little bit more against Nikola Jokic, right? As opposed to Lively, who still kind of learning, how to move his feet, still kind of learning how to defend guys like that. You could put in Gafford, who's played, more in the league and has gone up against in the East guys like Joel Embiid and Giannis. Like he's got experience doing that. So it gives the Mavericks so many more avenues to be able to kind of shape how they want to play opponents, and that's such a crucial item. And the Mavericks have an open roster spot, so now you can look at buyout candidates because they're one of the teams that can actually, because they're under that first apron for the luxury tax, they're one of those teams that can go out and get. Is it a guy like Marcus Morris? Do you reunite him with his brother? Do you go out and get a Spencer Dinwiddie? Who was at the Mavs Knicks game last night? Like now you can fill out that roster and bring in another piece that can potentially help the Mavericks as you get into this playoff push here in the last couple of months of the year.
Yeah, and I feel like just going back to these two players, and you brought up a good point. I'll talk about that in a second. Just going back on these two players, PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, they're both young, and not only that, they both fit what the Mavs need. They provide size. I mean, you're bringing in, we already talked about Washington's measurements, but Gafford's 6'10", and he plays above the rim, both sides of the ball. So you're also providing front court depth, with Gafford, and you're providing a scoring punch with Washington in the starting lineup. And you talked about it last week, that big 43-point game Washington had. But, not only that, the big picture here is they're coming off of bad teams. And that's what really boils down to is, let's be honest. I mean, both of them have game and they're young, but when you're playing on the Hornets and Wizards every single night, I think we talked about it with Kuzma, but like every single night, you're not going to bring your A game. I mean, you're not going to bring it all the time because honestly, those games are just developmental games because you're really seeing
anything. Like,
you're not playing for. That's what Spencer said about the Wizards. They're not playing for anything. I mean, that's what it really is because you're just seeing who is a part of your core moving forward as you rebuild. And that's what makes me so excited to see these two players come into a winning environment. Even if the Mavs are 8th, I mean, they're a couple games back from 5th, or a game and a half. We'll talk about standings, but going to a winning environment, like we mentioned, you have vets. You know, you actually have real vets who won. I mean, Markieff Morris won a championship. Kyrie Irving won a championship. Was one of the best players of all time, and he's won at the Olympics too. So like, you have guys who know how to win at a high level, and you have coaches who know how to win at a high level. Kid, player, and coach. Yep. And then Dudley. I mean, the list goes on. You actually have a winning environment. You have your minority owner, on the side of the court every game, actually investing in the team. There's Nico Harrison. He's just a cool, laid back dude who does everything that he can to win for this team, to bring guys in, and he's very nice with the players. So he has a player relationship as well. But just overall, these two players, obviously we talked about what they can do from what we've seen, but you have to factor in them coming from the Wizards organization, who's been losing for years.
Yeah.
In the Hornets organization, losing for years. Going to the Mavericks organization, who only had really a bad season last season, but they've been winning. They have the formula to win. And now that they're getting healthy and you're bringing in help, that's going to be very interesting to see. Very interesting to see. And then also, you said with the buyout candidates.
Yeah.
That
it's going to be
is one thing to see, because you just mentioned two prospects that could fit here. And also, like, I could see Killian Hayes, him as a prospect, because Dante is hurt. So let's talk about that, because
who's the guy that you would want? Like, if you're the Mavs, like, who's the one guy you're going after, knowing the situation, knowing the roster right now? Like, what's the player, or maybe not even a player, but what's the type of player that you want, on the buyout market?
Okay, the type of player I want is someone who fits the timeline of Luka, who is coming from a bad organization, like we've said, who I think would change their ways and get back to being who they truly can be, is Killian Hayes. But I think that's who I would want personally. But I think they're in win now mode.
Yeah.
So I think you have to go for Spencer Dinwiddie, who has the experience of playing in Dallas, who has the experience of playing great in Dallas. He played his best ball of his career in Dallas, most efficient year. He played 2 seasons, but really 1 if you combine them. And he also smiled while playing basketball. You see the difference of how he's playing.
It's Brooklyn. He looked. Oh my God! It was just.
And that's the difference. Like, he was dapping up Mark Cuban when he hit game winners. He was just smiling all the time. He had the confidence. And he was just playing beautiful basketball when he was with Dallas. And they need another ball handler, because Exum, he's not used to playing these long games. And when he did play these long games, back his first run in the NBA, he was hurt too. So, like, maybe he is an injury prone guy. I hope he's not, and I hope he gets back to playing how he was when he was healthy. But it is what it is. I mean, he's not used to playing these long games, just like Derek Lively, which you're seeing injuries there too. So you have to have a guy who can play every night, and that's Spencer Dinwiddie. And I think he can be the third ball handler, and it worked well as a third ball handler when he was here. Who do you think?
I was going to say Spencer Dinwiddie. I think, I'm intrigued by the idea of Marcus Morris, but I just think from a front court perspective, I don't know where he fits in with that, right? If you're looking at guys like, obviously it feels like Josh Green's going to start going forward. But then when you talk about guys like Maxey and Gafford now, and Lively and
Derek Jones,
and even Powell, Omax, like, it's like, where does Marcus Morris kind of fit in that? And I think with Dante's injury, to your point, it's a little concerning because it feels like he's missed like 3 months and that injury is not getting better.
It's different injuries. That's the problem.
Yeah, and it's if you're the Mavericks, like Luka leads the league in minutes played, like you got to reduce that, right? Like you and Kyrie, like if Kyrie gets hurt again, unfortunately, I mean, some of these injuries for him are just, they're caused by the other team, unfortunately. But you need another guy because Jaden Hardy, we know, can't really be the primary creator. He's been more effective kind of off ball. But you've seen the struggles with Hardy and Hardaway on the court together. Like they shouldn't be playing on the court together. Like it's got to be one or the other. So I think bringing in another guy like Spencer, who, again, a guy that knows his role, right, has been here before, knows what's being asked of him, knows he's not going to be a guy that's, I got to prove myself. I got to do that. He loved it in Dallas by all accounts. Like, dude was a great teammate. Loved playing with Luka. Luka loved him. I think Dinwiddie, Killian Hayes is really intriguing. I think he was really, really highly touted as a prospect. I just think the demand's going to be way too high for him. I think for Spencer, it seems like it's coming down to Dallas and LA. And if I'm Spencer,
and Hayes needs to go somewhere he's going to play.
Yeah, Hayes is going to be
like a lot of minutes,
15-minute game here. Like that's not, he needs to go somewhere that's another rebuilding team, right? Like it's unfortunate.
Yes.
Had like so many high draft picks, so you get Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, and he kind of fell out of the rotation. But if he goes to a place like the Pelicans, who need a point guard, if he goes to a place something like that where potentially he can get a lot of run, that's probably a better suited option for him. For Dinwiddie, if it's between us and LA, I mean that's a tough choice because both are kind of down in that play-in tournament area. But I think you're going to get more playing time with Dallas. I think Dallas is in a better situation than the Lakers are, especially after the Lakers didn't make any moves yesterday. But it'll be interesting to see. I don't know what the timeline is for buyout candidates. You probably may know that a little bit better than I do. If the Mavericks can get Spencer Dinwiddie, I think this is a team that could make some noise in the playoffs. Like I think this deadline was that good where if everything works as well as we think it will, even with only 30 games left, this is a team that should scare people come playoff time.
Well, he has to wait 48 hours. So it won't be today. He'll be able to clear tomorrow. So hopefully we hear some things by then on where he's leaning towards. But yeah, LA and Mavs, I mean, honestly, he's from LA, but he has more ties with the Mavericks. And he was at the game. I mean, he was at the Mavs game.
You gotta just come back and playing with Cuban.
Exactly. He was literally getting a recruiting college trip, watching the game in the stands. Like he gets a full first person, reaction to how he can envision his role. Just look at the Hardy minutes. That's your role.
And that's you. That game, I think, I want to say this because I think it's understated. We talked about Maxi's defensive improvement. I think you saw that last night. Like that was, I mean, some of the things that he was doing, 4 blocks last night, the pump fake and drive to the rim, like that's Maxi stuff we haven't seen in years. Like, and I think watching Dwight Powell struggle to get rebounds made me really happy because I was like, thank God we have Daniel Gafford coming in. Like this is going to be awesome. But I think last night, like you saw what this team can be when they communicate, and when this was easily a game that the Mavericks could have overlooked and lost. Right, the Knicks were literally down to 8 players, so this was easily a game that the Mavericks could have. And Knicks tried hard to come back. I mean, they brought it to within like 6 right in the fourth before the Mavs pulled away. DiVincenzo was hitting some crazy shots, and easily the Mavs could have folded and said, "Well, oh my God, like why?" But they kept battling and were very resilient. I think it feels like there's a different kind of, and I know it's one game, but this week, 3-game winning streak, it feels like there's a different kind of feel around the team. The 3 games that easily the Mavs could have overlooked and just been like their Eastern Conference games, whatever. Sixers don't have Embiid, Knicks don't have Brunson or Randall, but they pulled out some pretty good victories. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen here over the next couple of months.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, the 3-game win streak where they needed wins, just from the landslide that they were going down in the standings, and other teams were winning. The Suns, the Pelicans, teams above them were winning. The Kings, up until recently, were winning. So they had to win those games. But like you mentioned, even though they had to win those games because other opposing team stars were out, I feel like that's when other teams really catch you on your toes. Like every player plays harder than they usually do. I mean, they play better than they usually do with Dante and all the other guys. They're playing hard, Precious and all those guys. It's one thing to lose yourself in the game, like you mentioned, they had the possibility of doing, but also maintaining poise. And that's what Kyrie says, stay poised and everything will work out. And I think that's the downside and the beauty of Kid letting his players play through games like this, because you don't want to see it often, and that's the downside with Kid. He does it often, but it's the beauty also, because that was the downside of Carlisle, call timeouts all the time. And Kid has that Phil Jackson, strategy where he lets his players play through it, because you're going to have games like that in the playoffs, and you have to know how to combat those struggles real time while you're on the court. And I think that's one thing that, Kid lets his players play through, and I think it worked out. And Knicks really didn't have a chance in that game. They made a comeback in the fourth, and it looked a little scary, but I mean, the Mavs were going to win that game regardless. So
you made a really good point, and it just it got me thinking when you mentioned the poise that Kyrie has and just his veteran kind of leadership. And I'm sitting here thinking, wow, these 3 games have been different, and it's because Kyrie came back. Like, and it's not just for his scoring or his offensive, his offensive game. It's the headspace that he's in and acting as a leader on this team. Like Luka, we know can get a little hot-headed and can kind of, with the complaining and things like that. And the team feeds off of that.
We saw it last night.
But when Kyrie's on the court, I mean, he adds that other element, just from a mental standpoint. That's a really good point you brought up. And I didn't think about that too much, but we talk about Kyrie, being in a different space mentally, being in a different space in his life, and really kind of accepting, the position he's in, and him accepting himself as a player and who he is. And I think you can kind of see that calmness really exudes with the rest of the team. And you can see the leadership from Kyrie going up to Luka, going up to Timmy, like he's playing that role that LeBron played on the Cavs, and now he's kind of taking that over as like, hey, I'm going to be the leader on this. But Luka's the guy. Let me take care of everything else. And I think you see a different brand of Mavs basketball when that's happening.
And honestly, I mean, I know fans don't want to hear it, but that's the same Zen-like mentality that Jason Kidd has. And that's why I said it's the downside and the beauty of it. But that's why him and Kyrie are so close. I mean, they both have that stay poised even when you're winning, and stay poised even when you're losing, because you don't want others to see you panic. And that's why the beauty of the relationship with Luka really works, because you don't have 2 guys panicking all the time, and you don't have 2 guys staying poised, when they're losing by 20.
There's a big respect factor there too, right? I think Luka knows what Kyrie's been, who Kyrie Irving is. Like, he was a number 1 pick. He's an NBA champion. He's an all NBA player. I think he understands that. I think there's a level of respect there from Luka, and I think even from Kyrie, there's a level of respect to Luka, saying, "Man, this guy, is doing things that LeBron did, or doing things better than LeBron did at his age, And so I think from Kyrie's perspective, it's a mutual admiration that they have for each other, and they work with each other's games. The pick and rolls, when it's them 2 in a pick and roll, like, that thing is just unstoppable. Because it's like, what do you do? Like, which one are you gonna as a defender, do you kind of pop and stay closer to Kyrie and let Luka take you to the rim, or are you gonna double Luka and have him kick out and Kyrie can make the extra pass? Like, it's beautiful basketball to see, and you're starting to see that click as they play more games together.
It's really like yin and yang. You know,
Yeah.
they really are opposites, and that's why they attract. You
Hmm.
know, because they it's a beautiful pairing, to be honest. I mean, their games are so fluid, and they can get whatever shot. They're 3 level scores. They can do, and they can construct the offense how they want. But they're also different. Like Kyrie, he he pushes other players to, score on their own, or get their shots. He empowers other players, while Luca, he sets up other players to
Hmm.
make it easier. So they both are pushing their teammates in different ways to be better players. And then also, he's very zen like, and Luca, he is hot at it. He's 24. So
Yeah.
they also attract in that way as well, because you know Kyrie brings Luca down in very high pressure situations, while Luca, he really gets Kyrie's enjoyment back. You
Yeah.
know, like you would never. I've never seen personally. I don't know if this is true or not, but I've never seen Kyrie doing half court shots in practice,
Yeah.
like before the Mavs.
Yeah.
Like he actually enjoys these things that Luca
He's having
does,
fun finally
and
for the first time in a
he's
while.
having fun. Like he's at peace. Like
Yeah.
if you saw him doing that with the Nets, the media would go crazy. Like
Yeah.
now when we see it, we're like, Kyrie's actually having fun out here. So they both push each other in different ways, but they have a common goal. And like you said, the big word is respect for each other. And Kyrie's the only player that Luca has changed his game for.
Yeah.
And he pushes the pace faster now because of Kyrie. He gets the ball out of his hands more because of Kyrie. Like he's the only player that he's done that for, truly, in a full fashion type of way. So I think it's a beauty. And he's 31, and Luca is 24. Like they're so different, but in ways they're alike, because they have a common goal of working together, and they do play seamlessly
Yeah.
together,
They really
as
do.
we see on a nightly basis. They just got to stay healthy. That's a problem. And then you have guys around them. That's
Yeah.
what's really great.
Yeah.
Okay, so Shahnavaz.
Oof.
So we just talked about the 3-game win streak. Now you tell us who do the Mavs play on this 3-game home streak that's very pivotal for the team.
All right. So we've talked about the Mavs schedule and how brutal January and really the beginning of February was. This is going to be a really critical stretch for Dallas. This homestand going into the All-Star break, because you've got Oklahoma City on Saturday.
Ooh, that's
Who
gonna be
of course is the
pure
third.
cinema.
Yeah, they're the third seed in the West. They're half game behind Denver and Minnesota for that first, being tied kind of for first. And Oklahoma City is a young team. We've seen the Mavericks have, come back against them, right? And unfortunately lose. So this is going to be a really, really good, game. It's going to be interesting to see whether PJ and Daniel Gafford end up playing in this game. But after that, going into the All-Star break, the Mavericks have the Wizards on Monday and the Spurs on Valentine's Day, on Wednesday. So two teams that are bottom dwellers that should be wins for the Mavericks. The reason I say it's critical is because you look at the standings and where the Mavericks lie right now. In the 8th seed, they're a game out of being in that coveted 7th spot, which is where we kind of
just
thought,
a game. Because the
Kings have been losing. So,
yeah,
where we thought kind of they'd end up as 7. Ideally, they want to get to 6, right? Ideally, you're saying, I don't want to be in the play-in. That gives you some extra time to rest. But the reason I say that this stretch is critical is because if you look at what the Kings' schedule is, right in front of them, the Kings have to go. The Kings play tonight against the Nuggets. That's a home game for Sacramento. Then the Kings on Sunday have to play Oklahoma City. In Oklahoma City, so they've got to travel there. Then on Tuesday, the Kings have to go.
Wait, the Thunder play the Mavs tomorrow, so that's a back-to-back
On Sunday. Yep, it's a back-to-back for the Thunder.
Ooh, but okay. It might be tough though.
But it's a quick turnaround. You know, it's an afternoon game.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
It's Oklahoma City's
Oh yeah.
2 hours away. You know, not terrible for them. And then Sacramento then has to play Phoenix in Phoenix on Tuesday. And then
that's a gauntlet.
Sacramento has another game, back-to-back. The next night they have to travel to Denver and play the Nuggets.
Wait, so what? They got all these games before All-Star break?
They've got 4 games before the All-Star break.
Oh, man, that could be...
One against the Thunder, one against the Suns. So all playoff teams.
So they could realistically be 0-4.
Yep. And if
or
the
they
Mavericks,
could be 4-0.
Or they could be 4-0, but this is that the Mavericks just got to take care of business. I mean, that's
so
you would expect the Kings potentially to lose 2 of those games, maybe.
2 though, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think
and the Mavs could win the next 3.
Mavs could win the next 3, even if they lose against the Thunder.
2-1.
You know, 2-1. You take over the 7th seed by a game. You know, I mean that
would be nice, yeah.
Right.
And then also you mentioned the Mavs. You know, they want to be you want to be 6th seed. Honestly, you want to be as high as you can, but realistically, the Suns are probably going to wrap up that 5th seed going just the way that they're playing. They're the hottest team right now.
And getting Royce O'Neal
have to be realistic.
Huge. Yeah, getting Royce O'Neal.
Good move. Very good move. I feel bad for Dorian. I mean, all these players are getting out, and he's still there.
2 first-round picks for Dorian, man. Like, I love Dorian, but that's the Nets are just trying to, like, I don't know what they're doing. That they're so it doesn't make sense to me. But
it doesn't.
We'll
see you in a couple of years.
Yeah, looking at standings wise, I mean, if you talk about after the All-Star break, you know, the Mavs open up against Phoenix on the 22nd. That's a home game. But then the schedule's, you know, I mean, it's pretty. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it gets a little bit softer than what we've seen.
Not playing contenders,
right? They play the Pacers a couple times. You know, Toronto, Philly, who without Embiid, you know, it looks like a shell of themselves. Miami's been struggling. Detroit, Chicago. You know, so there's a couple games in there leading into March that the Mavericks should be able to win. Versus you look at the Kings, they come back from the break, they open up with the Spurs, then they got to play the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Wolves, and the Lakers. So
they're about to bottom out.
The Kings schedule is really, really hard. Like,
and they didn't have any All-Stars, so I feel bad for them. Dang.
So this is like a perfect opportunity for Dallas to at least get up to 7, right? I mean, who knows what happens with New Orleans, right? If somebody bottoms out. I mean, the Mavericks are they're only a game and a half out, you know, of that 6 seed, right? So New Orleans is playing well. They've won 4 in a row. I mean, it's really going to depend. You know, Zion's health. He's been healthy all year. It's been great to watch because watching, you know, if you're ever watching play, and I know you're a big Brandon Ingram fan. So it's always fun to watch the Pelicans play because I feel like that's a team that can make some noise this year. I know last year I had them ranked pretty high, but
they have to
that 7 seed. I think that's ideal.
They have to be 6. They have to be 6.
You don't want to
out of the play-in.
In the play-in, right? Like we saw last year. Anything can happen.
And that's what I was saying. I think the Suns finish 5th, and I think the Mavs really duke it out with the Pelicans for 6. And I think both teams, just like you mentioned, the Pelicans was hot. I feel like there's a surge here in Dallas. You know, you've seen the Mavs finally get Kyrie back, and then you're bringing help with Washington and Gafford, who they need. And so you really have a balanced team. I mean, obviously they can get a little better defensively, but well, yeah. I mean, it boils down to health, but it boils down to health for the Pelicans. I mean, they always have injuries.
That's true.
But they're playing good right now, and they're healthy right now. But they always have injuries down the stretch. So you really have to be 6. And I'm not talking about play-in tournament. That's half of the reason. I am talking about Luka Doncic winning the MVP.
Yeah.
You have I don't remember a 7th seed team having an MVP. And that's why I feel like team record is so bogus on how much weight they have into team record. Obviously, it's a big part of it. I mean, it's a very big part of it.
When Westbrook won, weren't the Thunder like
6 seed,
right? Yeah,
6 seed. That's what I'm saying. That's like the threshold that they use. I mean, you have to be at least a 6 seed, but I feel like even like a 6 seed and a 7 seed could be half a game difference. So, but the way they construct things, I would have to look for any MVP that has won the MVP with a 7 seed or below. It'll probably be not many at all. I mean, if there's even one. So that's what I'm saying. Luka has to get 6 seed because the stats are there, the eye test is there, but you have to get 6 seed to have a real legit case. And I think he does, especially with Embiid out. I feel like he does for what he's doing on a nightly basis. The stats are eye popping. I mean, he has to get 6 seed.
And you know,
he is on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Defensively, he's been. This is the best defense he's played. You know, in his career. I know it's the way he's able to steal the ball and just kind of
4 steals yesterday.
He's been playing great defensively. There's still, you know, obviously it could be better, but you know, if you look at just the year-over-year improvement, I mean, that's what you want to see, right? And just, you know, I'm looking at schedules for the Pelicans and Suns because the Kings, you know, we talked about their struggles. The Pelicans have I don't want to say easy, but you know, they're playing a lot of Eastern Conference teams going down the stretch, and you know, not really anything that's going to, you know, they've got to play obviously Boston once. They play the Thunder one more time. The Suns, though, man. You look at the Suns' schedule. After the All-Star break, they've got the Nuggets. They have to play the Celtics twice in 1 week. They've got to play the Bucks and the Sixers in the same week. They've got to play Nuggets and Thunder in the same week. And then they close the year with Timberwolves, Pelicans, Clippers, Kings, Timberwolves. So the Suns, I mean, I feel like that last week, 2 weeks of the season is really going to shuffle that 5, 6, 7 spot. You're going to start to see a little bit of movement there.
Yeah.
And if the Mavs, you know, I think the good thing about this trade, you know, this trade deadline is, you know, the Mavericks can kind of slowly integrate PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and you've got the All-Star break coming up. So as guys who aren't All-Stars, they can sit back, work with the team, you know, work with Kyrie, you know, as Luka is going to be in Vegas, but he'll come back, and you have that week to kind of integrate them and you know, have practice and kind of figure things out.
If they don't go on vacation.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, you know, there's
that's a long break
up there that go on vacation. That's fine. Go for the weekend, but
no, not PJ and Gafford. I'm talking about, you know, Kyrie and some of the other players, THJ.
The hope is that, you know, there's some veteran leaders on there who say, look, we got to get these guys, you know, let's get them acclimated, right? Or throw them in against the Wizards on Monday night. That's a scrimmage game anyway. Let's see, just let them figure it out on the court.
That's your learning experience. The Spurs and the Wizards.
There you go. That's perfect way to go into the All-Star break.
That would be interesting though if let's say Gafford doesn't he's not able to play tomorrow, or even if he suits up and doesn't play. You know, just because there's not enough time to learn the plays and the scheme.
Right.
But what if his first real experience is against the Wizards? That would be interesting to see how he plays. That would be very interesting.
I would not be
him blocking Kuzma or something.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, so Shahnavaz, final words. I mean, you talked about how pivotal it is to win these games for the Mavericks before the All-Star break, but what would you like to see? Because it's an early game, so I mean, we're only half a day, or we're only a full day away from the game starting. So I mean, like, what would you like to see from the Mavericks against the Thunder? You talked about it a little bit, but like specifically against the Thunder, what would you like to see?
I want to see them maintain the same defensive intensity that they've held the last few games. I think you've seen a different, and I don't know if it's the way that they're playing kind of zone coverage or the way that they're really, really being aggressive with their switches and being able to kind of rotate back. But I think the last week or so, you've seen a different level of defense from Dallas, and you can see it, you know, when you watch the games. I want to see that, and I want to see that aggressive, even if the Mavericks are down 10, 15, like. They've come back against this team before. You know, they can do it again. You know, just maintain that same level of aggressiveness on the defensive end. and hopefully pull out a win.
Yeah, and I just want to see Luka versus SGA.
That's gonna be fun.
That's really, they're the all-star starters for the West. Let's see who has the best game between those two. And just a great game.
Yeah.
I like a great game. All right, well, thanks for everyone tuning in. Make sure y'all like and subscribe and follow us on social media. But great things are ahead. PJ Washington is here. Daniel Gafford is here. Nico is here to save the day
Let
and
Nico
get
cook.
the Mavs more wins. Let him cook. Goodbye.